There are 6 midshipmen who were on the semester abroad program in China, and it's a very different experience from, say, a lot of some midshipmen presented last week in Japan. So without further ado, I'm very glad to have them agree. Thank you very much to talk to us, and also thank Professor Ray Shen to coach them, to put everything together. So
I don't need to say that much. So do you know all of them? Do you know them? You know everyone, correct?
No.
You know each other? No? Okay, like when you stand up yourself, introduce yourself. And then we all know that living abroad is a very unique experience. And today we are more focused on intellectual discussion. Each of them will present a topic and talk about their own view, their own discovery of China. So we start from Megan. Okay.
Supposed to use this? Okay.
Everyone have 5 minutes, and then we have a question.
Oh, just leave it? You can do that.
Okay, start.
All right. My name is First Class Megan McCulloch. My Chinese name is Sherman. My topic is, what is China? China is a country that has been pigeonholed. People are always trying to categorize it, try to stereotype it, try to fit it in a nice, neat little box. China does not fit in a box. It cannot be fit in a box. It's a kaleidoscope. It is everything that people say it is, but it's not anything that's neat and tidy that people say it is. This is the local restaurant that we ate at a lot. The 3 in the back are obviously Riley and Tristan, another kid who was on the program, and the 4 Xiaomei's who, Fuyuan, who worked at the restaurant, and were very helpful.
What's Xiaomei?
Little sisters. And Fuyuan is, it was a family-run restaurant, family-run business, and the Fuyuan are the waitresses, so they were the waitresses. There you go. No, it's gone too far. Sorry. Okay. China has pollution problems, but it also has clear blue skies, especially surrounding the Olympics. In the bottom is Beijing on a blue sky day over from a high point. And then this is one of the Datong, one of the coal cities. That's actually not snow. That's my flash photo at night. I was trying to take a picture of the construction work, and there was so much dust, dirt, and coal smog in the air that my picture photo didn't work. I couldn't take flash that night. And this is one of the girls who'd taken her scarf and put it up over her face to try and get a reprieve from what she was seeing. China is a police state. On every corner there are security guards of some some sort. Here you can see them. They're guarding actually a high-level manner, but they're also trying to implement and work on their rule of law. On the right is the Supreme Court. That's the sign outside for the Supreme Court, and they're working on trying to get a rule of law established and working better. So it's something that kind of balances out against each other, that you don't really imagine a police state with a high-level rule of law that works well. This is just the traditional versus the modern Western culture. This is the middle of nowhere. They're out, all the men and boys are out playing pool in the middle of the day, just enjoying the day, the holiday. And that's at a Buddhist temple outside Buddhist caves with the incense. And then this is modern Western culture. There's a big super Walmart. This is just different pictures of architecture, the differences of the different eras. That's the foreign legation district in Beijing. As the West comes in, they bring their architecture. This is from the Maoist era, when they were following Russian building trends and building high-level rises. Just more architecture. This is more pictures of just modern versus older, and some old versus new, and some. You have the Beijing in Tiananmen Square. They have beautiful lights celebrating them moving into the 21st century. They have giant malls celebrating BMW, and then they have the hutongs, which are sometimes, some of them, the further you get into them, are more like third world countries. Some of them don't have electricity. You have to go outside to go to the bathroom. They're public bathrooms. In some of the cities outside of Beijing, the trash is just in the streets, and once a week they burn them. So you have this beautiful, in Beijing, Shanghai, you have beautiful modern. It looks, in parts of it, there's this facade of 21st century. Look at China, how great and strong it is. And it is, but then you also step further into it, and there's a level of fragility. Just more west, east, third world, first world. There's different peoples. China's very, some of it's very international, Beijing especially. More from our program, these are our roommates, us with our roommates. And then some friends we made while we were there. They're all from Indonesia. And there's lots of building. Everybody's building in China. Everywhere. This is out in the countryside. It's still beautiful. In some cities, it's industrial. In the countryside, it's still very agrarian and beautiful, picturesque. And that's it. Don't worry. Didn't go anywhere.
Oh, down here. Okay, sorry that the screen's not on.
What's going on?
Look at the computer next to the mouse.
Well, China is a very chaotic picture. You have everything together, and Molly will talk about the culture. Everyone, we all know Chinese think differently from the Americans. In what ways they think differently? So she will, from this angle, to introduce her own experience.
Yes, that's exactly what I was talking about. A lot of people, when I got back, they asked me, okay, what do you think about China? And the first thing that comes to my mind is that China is different. It's very different from America. And this picture, when everyone thinks of China, they think of the Great Wall. And in itself, that kind of shows that China has 2,000 years of history. We have maybe a couple hundred. So that's the first big difference, is that we walk around the city and just getting used to seeing temples, something like this. It's just amazing because, we're not used to that, that depth of history. That's the first thing. This is a street scene. Especially pay attention to that guy in the middle. Looking around the city, you see that it's not the same. You can see it's hazy. You can see the tall buildings. You can see that there's bikes. There's more bikes than cars on the road at this point. And, traffic in Beijing, I didn't capture that in this picture, but however, this is a common sight. There's lots of bikes. There's lots of taxis. There are traffic laws, but no one follows them, and that's a big part of Chinese society. China is not a law-abiding society like America is. A good example of that is I was in a taxi car, and we were going around a roundabout, and a van came and hit us on the side. And our taxi driver jumped out, started arguing with the guy that hit him. And he said, okay, the guy that hit him said, okay, I think that's, worth 200 RMB. And our taxi driver goes, no, 5. And they negotiated. No cops were called. I saw a cop drive by, didn't even stop, even though we were holding up traffic. And they just don't get involved. That's the way China is that it's all done by negotiation. So law-abiding society versus non-law-abiding society, and that's what China is. Also, safety standards. This is kind of not like the best example, but I like that picture. But sometimes you see whole families. You'll see the mother, the father, and them holding the kid, like, in between their legs, like between the handlebars. And in America, there's no helmets. You see this like in the middle of a busy street. And in America, that would never pass. No one wears seatbelts. People turn on red lights, that kind of thing. And another thing, when you saw the pictures of Da Tong, when she was taking pictures of the construction site, we were walking along one night, and we looked down, and there was probably an open manhole, maybe 3 feet from where we were walking, and no lights, nothing, closed off, but they just really don't have any safety regulations. There's a typical toilet, just something different. Food, that's a huge thing that's different. Now, obviously, like, this is catered for tourists. You see starfish, you see squid, you see everything. He's eating a silkworm there. This is a goat that we actually saw. We saw it hanging there, and they skinned it, and then they served it for us, and that was in the royal place that we visited. And then that's some kind of the food. Everything's served family style. This is an example of a street vendor that's common. Actually, during the Olympics, they kicked all the street vendors off the streets, but it's really like one of my favorite things about China is just being able to walk out your door and buy whatever you want. And so that's a picture of someone selling watermelons. So we learned how to meditate in one of our philosophy classes, and we also started attracting attention, from other tourists. But China recognizes only 5 religions, and that's Buddhism, Taoism, Catholicism, Protestantism, and Islam. And other than that, really, it's the government that's in control. So right now, there's actually a crisis in China. There's a moral void where people have the government has backed off since the time of Mao Zedong. Now people really don't know what to believe in. That whole like communist ideology has kind of faded away, and now people don't know what to put their beliefs in. So that's a huge problem in China right now. And you ask really what do people believe in China, they say themselves, they're really like out to make money. And some things are coming back, like Confucianism. The government's really, trying to increase that again. But that's one of the things China's dealing with right now. This is a picture of us. That's Beijing in the background. What I'm going to talk about now is kind of stereotypes. You see me, I'm kind of a token American. I have blonde hair and blue eyes, and they pretty much all could guess that I was American. This is Karen. Her parents are Taiwanese, but everyone, if we would go out in a group, they would just talk to her. They wouldn't talk to us. They would just assume that she spoke Chinese perfectly and that she knew everything, even though, she was better than us, but we all could, communicate. So that's like one really interesting thing. I remember with Shen Lao Shi during LSAP, she would say, I'm American, and they say, no, you're not, you're Chinese. And she would say, no, I'm American. And they just really have no, they don't understand that. So, and same with Riley and Marco, people would sometimes wonder where they're from, but it's really funny, like the way that they stereotype people, and that's why I know Shen Lao Shi and I had talked about this, but for Obama, the fact that they see an African American man in charge of our country is huge because for forever they've just like assumed that America is this white man, so that's interesting. This is us when we were also traveling. We were the only foreigners in town, probably some of the only foreigners that had ever gone to this village, I guess. I don't know. And so everyone in the town found out we wanted to ride horses, and they assumed that we're all rich and that we have money to spend. So literally, these people put us on their horses and took us away, and we had to have our Laoban, the woman that was looking out for us, chase after us and make sure that they weren't going to cheat us. So that's us, the chaos of trying to go horseback riding. They all love foreigners. This is a picture from a trip that I took to Dunhuang, and Dunhuang is a place that used to be on the Silk Road, and this is what it's known for. This is Buddhist art, and this is from the Mogao Caves. And I took this trip with a Chinese friend of mine and his roommate, because we all had a Chinese roommate. And I think he got to go see the Terracotta Warriors. Most of the other Chinese students that we were living with had never traveled outside of Beijing. I would say maybe sometimes they had gone places with their families, but in general they had never seen, things that we've seen. Like, we were so privileged to be able to go on LSAP and see all these great places in China and, all these historical places, but he had never seen those. So one of the places we went was to see the Terracotta Warriors. And then we also went to Inner Mongolia, and Inner Mongolia is all grassland. So that was probably one of the neatest experiences for me, to be able to not only practice my Chinese and get to know a Chinese student, but to see him experiencing all these things. I learned a lot about Chinese culture just through my relationship with him, and that was really neat. And then that's our teacher. But in general, I guess the point that I want to get across is there's a lot of physical differences that we can see in China. You can look at religion, you can look at food, you can look at the toilets, stuff like that. Those are little things, but in general, China is more than that. The way that they think is actually different than the way we think, and that goes back to Enlightenment ideas, and we're all based on the scientific method way of thinking, and they're more about Taoism and Confucianism and family matters and stuff like that. So whether it's in business or in foreign affairs or anything, that you have to remember that there's a different way of looking at the world, and I think I really learned a lot about that when I was there. But that's all I have. I also lost my passport, so passport holders are a good idea.
Hi, my name is First Class Marco Anich from 7th Company. Megan and Maggie covered some of the more general topics about China, covering the differences and what China is in general. So I'm going to cover something a little more specific, and it has to deal with something with the authoritarian government and how they operate things there. Obviously, it's a little different than the democratic society we have here, although it might relate somewhat similar to what we have here in the Naval Academy. But basically, yeah, it had something to do with my end of the semester research project, which we did for one of our main classes, and that was called 30JAN. 30JAN, directly translated into English, means demolish and then move. So basically what it is the forced relocating of people from their homes into new areas to make way for government reconstruction. And with China being a very modern, as well as modernizing state, there's a lot of reconstruction going on, as you might guess, especially in Beijing and Shanghai, where you just have a lot of people moving in, and they need to get more people and build higher skyscrapers to let more people move in there. So my goal was to find out whether or not it was really worth doing, whether the benefits outweighed the disastrous consequences of making people move. So I went around and I interviewed a bunch of Chinese citizens, and I have somewhat of my research in here, so I don't know how much you can get out of that if you read Chinese or my really bad English handwriting. You probably won't get much out of it. Here you go. I just got to flip through that. But anyways, yeah. So I went around and I interviewed about maybe 30 to 40 Chinese citizens, ranging from college students to professors, some people who worked on the 30JAN areas, and people who actually were affected directly by 30JAN. So. And I found a huge variety of responses. I walked through some of the Hutong districts that Megan had talked about. Those are the old, the courtyard homes that the old Beijingers live in. So those districts are really kind of nasty areas, They may be cultural sites for the Chinese, but they're also they haven't been renovated for decades. A lot of them don't have running water, lack of electricity, and just really unclean areas. So they need reconstruction and renovation. But I walked through a lot of these places, and people actually benefited greatly from 30JAN in the inner city. So I met one guy. He let me see his house. Basically, the government turned his home without running water or lights or anything like that into a refurbished little suite. Basically, they gave him light fixtures, refurbished his home, added a Western style toilet, whereas they used to have community squatters. They added a heater system, energy cell, and they painted everything. And he didn't have to do anything. He just lived in a nearby home, and so the government took care of him there. I also met one of our professors at the university we're at. She benefited greatly from 30JAN as well. The government set her up with a completely new apartment complex, and she's living now in a 3 times the size of where she was before for like half the price. So there's a lot of good coming out of a policy like 30JAN2009. Now there's also a darker side, and I mean it's pretty obvious with something where the government's making you move homes. In fact, I have some pictures here. These are the ones of the kind of the nicer areas that I saw from the renovation study. So, I did meet some people who were very dissatisfied with 30JAN2009 as well. So as you can imagine, a lot of people are being moved out of these places where they've lived all their life, and their grandparents have lived there, you know, since time eternal. And so a lot of these older people are having problems like adjusting, or they're not getting compensation to move into somewhere close to where they used to live before. So there's definitely some problems. I met one person who lived in the inner city. He was very old. His ancestors lived in his Hutong neighborhood in the middle of the city for centuries, and he basically wasn't not giving enough compensation from the government to move into another house nearby. So they're going to make him basically move to the outskirts of Beijing, where he had no idea, where to go. He would have had to learn how to use the transportation system, new hospital system, anything like that. So he's going to be in a little bit of trouble there, and that's pretty common with a lot of the older people. My last venture during my research took me to the outskirts of Beijing, where I basically saw some rubble neighborhoods, and I'll pass some of these around. You guys, maybe it'll circulate the rest of the presentation, but basically these were neighborhoods that were half completely demolished. Half of the neighborhood had moved out, and the rest of the neighborhood that was still there was taking the bricks of the old homes and building it upon their own. So those were all slapstick together cement brick houses, and they're pretty nasty areas. Took me a great deal of persistence, but I finally got people to talk over there. I interviewed some people, and they were just like very critical of the government over there, and they were not giving enough conversation to move anywhere, basically. And the basically finale of that 3 hours in that little neighborhood found me surrounded by 15 to 20 old Chinese ladies and guys just yelling Chinese curse words and things at me. They're saying, "Oh, fubai," corruption, or they're saying they weren't giving enough compensation. They were even asking if I was a reporter, if I would take it to the government, and if I would help them out in their situation. So I felt kind of like a hero walking out of there, but I couldn't really do anything. I just wrote a paper on it. But it just goes to show that there's really, I guess you could say a dichotomy of good and bad in pretty much everything that is China. And every government policy, everything about China is a conundrum. And there's a lot of good and a lot of not so good that they're trying to get better. So, yeah, that was my experience with 30JAN2009. Ultimately, I think it's a necessary thing, but it's God's problem. So, thanks.
All right. I'm first class Tristan Wellman, and like Marco, I'm focusing in on kind of more a specific topic, as opposed to the general ones previously introduced. And mine is basically cultural assimilation. And now the background of this is China is, it's a huge country with thousands of years of history. And officially there are 56 recognized ethnic groups in the entire country, and they all have major differences from each other. And there are even more ethnic minorities that are not officially recognized, who all believe that their culture is so unique that they should have this recognition. And overall, the majority group is called Han Chinese. For those of you who don't know that yet, but approximately 93% of the entire population of China is Han Chinese, and so all these other ethnic minorities are, pretty small groups. Some of them do have thousands of people, and they're all spread out over the entire country. And through some of our trips, we got to meet a lot of the people from these minority groups and interact with them and speak to them about the current situation that's facing them and their own cultures. And as an example of this, I'm going to use a lot of some of the pictures from a trip that some of us took out to one of the westernmost provinces called Xinjiang, which means New Frontier. Anyway, it's the home to the Uyghur people, and they are a Turkic people, so they seem Central Asian to appearance. If you saw them, you wouldn't think they were Chinese. They have their own language, It's Turkic-based also, and they're all Muslims. And this was also the location of some major stops along the Silk Road. Anyway, this is a mosque in the city of Kashgar, and anyway, basically, the major issues are, as China develops, they're like it's globalization, just as the same as everywhere else in the world. Like, things are changing. New technologies are introducing other cultures, kind of cross-pollinating things that wouldn't have happened before. And this is happening at such a rapid pace that it's not controlled in any measure, especially in China, where there's so many major issues that they have to take on and devote their resources to. Like, it's kind of something that's, I don't want to say, well, maybe I will say, kind of fallen by the wayside. Like, it's not that specifically managed about trying to integrate and preserve the local cultures of these minority groups into the bigger expansion and globalization. And actually, one of the things that's going on with Xinjiang, also going on with Tibet and some of the other westernmost provinces, are they're trying to develop them, particularly because these are areas that have been neglected in the past before, like, transportation routes were set up there. Traditionally, the seaward coast, the eastern coast, the south, those are all the areas that are most developed, have all the economics, like super cities. Anyway, they recently instituted this actual campaign called Develop the West, where they're encouraging people from the majority groups in the east, the more highly populated areas, to move west. They're giving them some economic incentives, building up jobs, helping go for the natural resources. And the trade-off with that is the people in their own areas find their own culture kind of being watered down, because they're being, well, the official estimates of the populations in some of these minority cities say that, you know, the minorities are still, like, the overwhelming majority. It's their city, their culture. But if you talk to any of the people there, they're saying, you know, there's so many, like, migrants coming in from outside of their area and bringing in their own new technological development that, like, they really can't hold their own. They can't speak their language in all the places they need to. It's really a challenge. And the communist government that's operating in these minority areas, they do take measures to include the local people, but what ends up happening is the local people, the Uyghur people who get involved in the communist government locally, they're the ones who are the most sinicized, the ones who end up speaking the best Chinese or Mandarin Chinese, or have the best connections with the Chinese people there. So ultimately, their culture ends up taking kind of a hit. This is another picture of at the mosque. And there were actually two groups that went out. Marco and I went out on one trip to this place, and we had a really fantastic experience out there. And it was really by chance that it all happened, but we got a really unique opportunity to get to know some of the people in the area and hear directly from them, like, about what's happening with their culture. Margot and I were, this is one of the major tourist sites in Kashgar, the Idka Mosque, and we were walking around in front, and a young man approached us and asked us, you know, where we were from in English, and his English was pretty good. And then when we chatted with him a little bit, he actually invited us to go to one of his English classes that was held 6 nights a week in this little, a pretty simple schoolhouse. So we agreed, thought it would be interesting, and we ended up going to this classroom. It's on the second story. It's one little room. They have a stove in the middle and a chalkboard, and they have their own little book. And the teacher was actually the best student they'd had before. And they were all incredibly friendly, all Uyghur people, about, I don't know, maybe 15 or so people about our age, who are all very interested in practicing their English and sharing their culture with us and hearing about our culture. And so we actually went back for a second night and played some English games with them. But the things we ended up learning from them were overall very interesting. You got to see what they valued most, and hearing that, it really emphasized just how distinct the different cultures are between them and the Han Chinese, like how central religion is to them, and just the structure of family. It's like very different things, and things that are kind of getting phased out the more developed the cities are. I guess all becoming a little more homogeneous, but anyway, they also place a very large stock in their own language, and they clearly conveyed to us how concerned they were at how rapidly it was declining in their own cities. So our trip to Xinjiang and Kashgar really showed us, gave us some insight into this big problem facing the minorities in the country. These are a couple of the students. They were, he was the youngest on the right. Yeah, but most of them were businessmen of some sort. It was kind of interesting to see just the spread of the students who came. This was our friend who introduced us, and he approached us. He left his little stall unattended when he came to talk to us. He was a perfume seller in front of the mosque, selling perfumes that didn't have alcohol in them for the Muslim people. And then we have a guy who is a famous jeweler in town who was also a shepherd, and he came late one night because his sheep got loose. And then like a music teacher at the local area. But one of the other interesting things about this is they're all taking the time, pretty much an extraordinary amount of time, out of their schedules to learn English. They're already fluent in Uyghur, they're fluent in Chinese, and here they are trying to learn English because they feel like in the cities, and with all the present development, they feel like it's something they need to do to kind of stay on top of like economic opportunity. If they're going to move ahead, this is something that will really help them out. And so they're spending 6 nights a week for 2 hours just studying English. And like, they all have jobs on the side, so, well, except for the kid. But, and this is actually out in a separate, I think, minority group area. This is a Kyrgyz village. And out in Xinjiang, a lot of other minorities exist in smaller numbers from some of the bordering countries too. It was really interesting to see, like, as we traveled along this road, you'd stop in one town and it would be Kyrgyz minority. The next town up would be like completely Tajik, and each of their schools it would be half taught in Chinese, half taught in Tajik. And you'd found, like, we stayed at one of the houses right behind Marco, and the man who hosted us was he's the man in the middle. His name is Sadiq, and he spoke English pretty well. He also spoke Chinese, Uyghur, and Kyrgyz. And he was kind of another example of how it's developing out there, because he learned English by being a sort of Sherpa for a lot of tourists who go and climb that mountain that's up behind you. And so just in these areas, things are changing, the new transportation, it's really all coming together at this time. So that's just one glimpse into one of the major problems facing the minorities, I think. So, all right.
All right. Nice. All right, guys. My name is Riley Walls. First class Riley Walls, and I'm gonna do some kind of same thing that Tristan did, but we went to Tibet for 7 days. If you haven't seen the movie, it's called 7 Years in Tibet, just so you know. All right, so these are all pictures we took while we were there. This is a yak. All right, guys, I want to talk a little bit about why I want to talk about Tibet. Tibet's kind of, everybody knows about the idea of Tibet, but not everybody really knows about Tibet. So I want to just kind of put a face on the issues everybody kind of talks about but doesn't really know about. You hear about it in the news all the time, but the people that talk about it haven't really studied that. So I wanted to give some stories and some faces to it. And you guys know this year in March, Tibet had some pretty serious riots. The Chinese government says 18 people were killed. Some Tibetan research says up to 200 people were killed. There's still 1,000 people missing from that riot. So it's getting to be a bigger deal. So I wanted to bring that. And of course, when we were there, we met some really cool people. So tell a story. So research methods. You see this guy here on your left was our guide. To go to Tibet, you have to have a guide. You can't just go by yourself. There's no independent tours there. And this is his older brother, also a tour guide. And to do the research, I used some personal experience, informal conversation with people all over Tibet, and I used some academic journals. I did my project on this when I was in Tibet, or in China. What's the point? So You know, you see this. This is right across the street from our hostel. I'll tell you some stories. This, you see this building? It's all burned out at the bottom. This is all burned. Those are all knocked out windows. This is all from the riot. Like the city of Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, went crazy in March. And this is just on the Chinese side of the town. The town really is divided by the Chinese and the Tibetans. And just across the little border, you know, the Chinatown side, the Tibetans came and just ransacked this place. But you know what? It's only a few months afterwards, and the Chinese moved back in. They're still doing business downstairs, still doing business upstairs. So it just kind of shows, like, even though there's tensions, you know, people are still trying to get their daily lives out. And you know, you can't see it right around the corner here. There's 25 guards, Chinese government, military, half of them with AK-47s on the ready, the other half, you know, riot batons, riot shields, helmets down, ready to go, like ready to do business. So it's pretty crazy. Life in Tibet's tough for everyone. I don't want to just talk, you know, I'm not trying to pick a side here, say Tibetans, you know, it's tough for Tibetans, tough for Chinese. Like, it's tough for everybody. There's a lot of Chinese people that are moving to Tibet, and things are tough for them too. Like, a lot of Sichuanese. Sichuan's a province right next door to Tibet, and things are really bad there too. You guys know about the earthquake that happened in Sichuan? Sichuan's really just a poor province, and they find opportunity moving to Tibet, so they see this as a rise up for them. And they do some really hard jobs in Tibet. They're like the immigrants that move in there, and they have to work hard for everything they do. Like, there was a story we read about, there was two journalists that were undercover in Tibet. They wanted to ride about a half day's drive up north, and they paid, it was a Sichuanese guy. He was driving them up to a lake north of Lhasa. Car broke down, and this guy, he's getting to drive 5 people for an entire day. He's getting paid like $30, and car breaks down. He's having to race as fast as he can because he has to. The Tibetans are the only ones supposed to be driving people, and he's doing this, you know, off the record. He gets out. He has to go back, suck gasoline out of the back of his tank, go in and inject it into the engine himself to get the car started again. And he does this. This is just another day for him. This is $30 work for him for an entire day. Like, it just things like that. It's just tough for everyone. So I want to bring that and some face to the issues. So all right, this is a picture from the Bakor. It's in the middle of the Tibetans, the center of the city. One of the most famous temples for Tibetan Buddhists is right behind here, and this is the market right in the middle. And this is a peace pact that was signed by the Chinese, the Tibetans, way back in history. I don't know the dates, so don't quote me on that. But there was 3 of these stone tablets, one in Lhasa, one on the border between China and Tibet, and one put in Beijing when this was signed, saying that there would never be war between our 2 countries. And this is the last one that exists. It's only in Lhasa. And then here's some Chinese soldiers that are patrolling. There's always roving patrols going around Lhasa. Usually about 8 guys, all AK-47s out, ready to go. So it just kind of shows, you know, I mean, things are a lot different in Lhasa now. And, you know, and here you'd expect to see just Tibetans selling. There's the huge market's got a lot of outdoor stalls and everything. People are selling stuff. You'd think it would all be Tibetans selling Tibetan stuff, dongxi. But really, about half of them are Sichuanese now. And you walk around and you can tell the difference real quickly. And they won't speak any Tibetan. You'll go up to them and you'll just talk to them. And actually, like, Sichuanese families have moved in and taken over half of the market now. And they're all pretending to sell Tibetan stuff. And a lot of the foreigners that come in can't really tell the difference, so they just kind of play it off like they're Tibetan. They wear some Tibetan clothes and stuff. But you start talking to them and you realize none of them are actually Tibetan. So it just, you know, the city's changing very quickly. So here's the actual temple, the market from on top of the temple. And these stalls are all the ones where the Sichuanese were selling stuff. You know, you'd think they're all Tibetans. This is the center of Tibetan town. No way. Plus, I don't know, maybe you missed it, but just to show the security stuff, there's guys up here on top of these buildings too with guns pointed down. Whenever there's unrest, this is usually the center. This is where it comes from, the center of unrest. And there's even been foreigners shot here when the riots happened and stuff. Like there's government, you know, military that shot foreigners accidentally. And there's guys walking on top of the buildings here. I just think I just missed it in this picture. Guy looking down onto to the temple area, just in case anything flared up. So what do Tibetans think? Just the same as Tristan was talking about. They can definitely see their culture disappearing. As you guys know, Mongolia borders China. There's a province of Inner Mongolia. It used to be mostly Mongolian. Now it's 83% Han Chinese. Xinjiang, over half Han Chinese now. So they feel the same thing. They feel their culture being pushed out. Tibet, same thing is exactly happening to them. Lhasa is now over 50% Han Chinese. Like, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Like, they're looking for opportunity, and the government's trying to give that opportunity to people, and they're getting paid a lot of money to go out there and live in really harsh conditions. So it's really bad for them too. But the Tibetans are definitely starting to feel the push. Like, their own capital of Tibet is mostly not them. So this is right here. This is right after Mount Everest is on the other side of this hill. We got to go check out Mount Everest. It's pretty cool. but this is one of the small villages outside near the Mount Everest area. And we got to kind of hang out with these guys, and we got to till their field, and I broke one of their plows accidentally. Actually, I was the last person to touch it before it broke, so they didn't blame it on me. Thank God. But I would have had some angry Tibetans. And I just, story about our tour guide. It's just to show the lack of opportunity. Here's our tour guide. He speaks great English, perfect Tibetan, perfect Chinese. He speaks Hindu. He speaks Nepali, and he's working on Chinese. He says I'm not very good at Chinese, but he speaks Chinese, writes Chinese. And he started German, but he quit because he said it was too hard. So, and he is seasonally unemployed. He went to school for 14 years in India. He snuck out of Tibet, went to India, got schooling in the Dar es Salaam, in the de facto capital for the Tibetans right now, the government in exile capital. Snuck back across the border. He was thrown in. Well, he snuck back across with some sheep, some yak herders. They followed the yaks across the Himalayas. He was captured by the government, with the police, when he got back for having traveled illegally across the border. He was thrown in jail for a month. He was tortured. He didn't want to tell us too much about the torture. He said he was lucky that he wasn't tortured as bad as some of the other ones. And he was lucky enough to get out of that okay. And now he's seasonally unemployed, despite the fact that he holds degrees in computer science, all the language stuff I told you about, political science degrees and stuff like that. Like it's just tough for him, And his wife's lucky to have a job with the Chinese telecommunications people, so they have enough money to survive the whole year. So, but he just wants his kid to learn English. He wants his kid so that his kid can have opportunities in the future. And I guess one other little story. It's weird because as an American, they feel like we're going to help them the most. They see America as kind of the free place, and they have that idea in their head. A lot of Tibetans do. So one day we were in a small coffee shop at one of the nunneries. They have Tibetan milk tea, with yak butter tea, which smells or tastes really bad. But they also have sweet tea, which tastes good. And I was going to the bathroom, and I looked into the kitchen as I'm walking by, and I see this picture of the Dalai Lama up in this guy's cooking. Well, you can't have a picture of the Dalai Lama in Tibet because they consider him the problem for all Tibetans. The Chinese do. And he sees me kind of look at him in the picture and go to the bathroom. On my way back, the guy just kind of comes out of the kitchen real quick and says, well, where are you from? Where are you from? In English. And he doesn't speak much English, so pretty much all he has was, where are you from? So I talked to him a bit in Chinese. And, he was kind of worried, I think, that I saw a picture. But once he found out I was from America, he was like, oh, no, please, thank you so much for being American. Like, thanks for helping us and everything. I didn't really know what to say because, after having studied this, I knew that, as for me, there's nothing I could really do to help. Same kind of thing. So you kind of feel this pull from them. So it's kind of sad. But, just to put some personal stories on it. So really the future, nobody really knows what's going to happen. But it's going to be a tough future for Tibet. Things are starting to ramp up there a bit. The Dalai Lama is starting to bring people in to talk about what they want, what autonomy or whatever they're going to get, the Tibetans. And the Chinese government's a little worried about, protest all over the country right now, including Tibet. So, but all predictions are pessimistic. Whether it gets autonomy and, there's more violence against the Han Chinese in Tibet, or whether it stays complete part of China and, the cultural genocide keeps happening. No matter what happens in Tibet, someone's going to lose. Someone's going to lose out. So the violence is going to continue. So, long, tough road. And that's a pretty big horn. We saw a picture of that. So, that's just outside. That's it for me.
Okay, well, seeing as we only have about 20 minutes left, I'll try to keep my topic pretty brief here. I'm First Class Kelly Zahalka from 18th Company. My topic is media censorship. I'll focus a little bit on TV, but mostly on the internet. It's pertinent to today. You hear it talked about all the time. Okay. So we learned while we were in China that the media was actually more free in 1980 than it is today in a lot of regards. Take the example of a man named Fang Lizhi. He was a university professor that traveled around talking about democracy and criticizing the Chinese Communist Party. And the government allowed him to do this pretty much all the way up until 1989 protests, which I'm sure that most of you have studied Chinese history are familiar with. In addition to Fang Lizhi, there was a democracy wall in Xidan, which is a part of Beijing, and there people had pretty much freedom of expression. They could write essays, they could post their opinions, and not really fear too much reprimand from the government. And today, you just don't see anything like that in place in Beijing right now. But like I said, the one biggest exception of that is the internet. There's still since it wasn't really around in 1980, it's an area where there is much more freedom of expression. It's just hard to monitor all the blogging and everything that's going on. There's a few key differences between Chinese media and U.S. media that I'd like to highlight. So in the United States, we see the media as a watchdog. It's sort of a checks and balance system for us. So if the government is doing something that we don't like, you might see it, sort of a parody of it on SNL, or you'll see the talking heads on CNN or Fox News discussing what the best path is or why this is wrong. You don't see this in China at all. I liken the Chinese media more towards like a C-SPAN. It's a little bit dry. It's just straight facts. I mean, it definitely is more condensed than C-SPAN, but the Chinese media exists to be the mouthpiece of the party. So it passes down the policy and it reports what it wants to tell about what's going on. Now, we often talk about propaganda in China, and the term used in Chinese, xuanchuan, doesn't carry the same connotations as it does in English. So when we say propaganda, we think of brainwashing, we think of all sorts of negative connotations, but xuanchuan in Chinese doesn't carry that necessarily such a negative influence in their language. So the Chinese see that the media is in place to protect the citizens from a lot of radical ideas. It's sort of, I hate to say like a babysitter for the people, but a lot of times the government feels that it needs to control what goes out for the benefit of the population. So where we might see it from the United States as more of a negative thing, they might take more of a positive outlook and saying, no, we're like actually trying to help the people, like maybe the United States TV rating system where we say 13 and older or 13 and younger shouldn't watch a program like this. The Chinese government feels that it can do that pretty much across the board for everybody by censoring. So for television, there's over 12 million hours of TV a year. And so to censor every single hour of television would be impossible. So most of the censorship in China is actually self-censorship. People do fear the repercussions that would come down from the Chinese government, but you don't have a government official looking through every single hour. And so I think that's pretty telling that people aren't necessarily trying to push the bounds as much as you might think coming from an American perspective. And for the internet, the biggest censorship is actually the English-Chinese firewall. So most Chinese, if they're using the internet to look at political stuff, which generally isn't what they use it for, they're not going to go to these English sites where we talk about how we think China needs democracy or what we think the best way to open China up is. They're just not going to look in English. I mean, those of you that are taking Chinese, if you were going to look at a site that was criticizing America, chances are you wouldn't look at one written in Chinese. You would try to stay in your native language just because that's where you're most comfortable operating. So I guess the internet is beginning to play the role of checks and balances in China. SARS, when that outbreak happened, it was internet and text messaging that actually broke that to the people more so than the Chinese media. And so that was one of the first times where we saw the people actually taking control over use of media and helping open up the environment. China has surpassed the United States in the number of internet users. Right now there's almost 300 million Chinese using the internet, which is the same as the population of the United States. Percentage-wise, it's still less, but it's a large number of people using the internet. I guess the final point, just to make this brief, is that the Chinese government, in terms of censorship, their goal is not 100% blockage. 95% or just to reach some barrier is enough for them. It's enough to just discourage general curiosity and further probing and attacks on the government and criticisms. So even though there are proxy servers and you can get around a lot of it in China, the Chinese government still considers their censorship to be a success because they seem to control most major outbreaks of dissent. So, okay, well,
And they all, from different angles, shed light on China. The China would be China. So, but we don't have that much time. Professor Yu, how many minutes we have?
About 10 minutes.
10 minutes, so you can ask questions and they will answer your questions.
This question is directed more towards Riley, but maybe they went to the event. How did you get a chance to talk with the local people about how they felt about the new railroad that recently went in there, especially considering that that is like one of the #1 modes of transportation for people in China? and what that means for the future.
Okay, yeah. Tristan and Megan all went to Tibet, but I guess the big thing with the railroad is that they just finished the railroad from Beijing. You can get all the way from Beijing to Lhasa now, and they're even trying to get was it Shigatse connected with the railroad. It's another city, the second biggest one in Tibet. And what's happening is thousands upon thousands of Han Chinese can move in very easily now to Tibet, and it's really accelerating the degradation of the Tibetan Tibetan majority in the province. So I didn't really actually. It's a good question. I didn't actually talk to anybody specifically about that, but most of my research on that came from the editorials I read, and mostly just about how it's just accelerating. It was already happening, but now it's just happening at accelerating pace. So I would say within a few years you're going to see exactly what happened to Xinjiang and Inner Mongolia happened to Tibet because of the railroad. So.
When you guys were traveling, how did you reveal to people that you were in the military, affiliated with the United States military, or did you kind of get down with?
Yeah, we didn't really advertise that at all, and we didn't bring it up to the people we were traveling with either.
What about like other Western foreigners?
Well, our whole program had a lot of civilian students from all over the country, and they knew.
Yeah, everyone in our program knew, even the Chinese students that we were friends with, our roommates and stuff, and a lot of them, were curious, but I mean, not as in like a probing way, just as in like a, wow, you're actually in the military way, but, so yeah, they were the only ones that really knew.
Normally they have that concept that much, where Naval can be different from other, it's a school.
Yeah, they just.
Marco and I, for the first day, we had our tutor.
Oh yeah.
I got attacked too.
Yeah, you got attacked too. The military is very different over there. The military, we kind of think of strategic and policy stuff too with the military. Theirs is all about just, control and military killing kind of thing. So when they thought we were military, it was, why are you in the military? Why do you want to study Chinese? Like that was the first two questions. And if you didn't answer why you're studying Chinese properly, and they were really worried about you. Marco and I got interrogated for like 2 hours on the first day, and I know.
I had my one-on-one teacher was really interested in aircraft carriers and wanted to know all about them, and I was like, I don't know how to say that in Chinese. I'm really sorry. And he was asking me when's China get an aircraft carrier and making predictions, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm sorry.
And then on the military issue, when we were in Xinjiang in the airport, we found a book in Chinese on the American military, on like all the specs of all the ships in the American Navy, and that was probably one of the oddest experiences I had in China, was all the magazines and books on the American military that I couldn't read, that probably knew more than I did, on like all these details and pro-knowledge stuff that is more detailed than the pro-knowledge they teach us here.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I had one of the Chinese students' friends, I guess, that I didn't know as well. Like, he was that was his thing, was like learning about our military and the Chinese military. They have like all these magazines that you can just buy off the street that's like about our military. And so he had on his phone pictures of different aircraft. Like, he was like, well, this should look familiar to you, and he's like talking about the F-22 and like all these things, and he knew more about it than I did, and I was just like, I don't know. You try not to be too specific about that stuff.
The concept of military in China is also very different. When Mao Zedong ruled, he said that the military should flow through the population like fish through the sea. So a lot of times you see people in uniform, you're not really sure if they're actually part of the military, or you'll see them wearing like slippers with their full dress military uniform. You're like, I don't really know. It's just a lot different. Right now they're professionalizing their force, and so I think you're going to start to see a lot of that fading away. But there still are some old remnants of, I guess, the former military.
Tristan mentioned the 56 ethnic groups, but I'll throw this out to any of you. Did you find that the people you met identified more with their ethnicity or their province they're from, or did they say I'm Chinese? The answer to that varied with where you go.
I would say that sort of varied. It also depended on like what, I guess, where they fell in like the social class, because a lot of the people you meet just on the street, I mean, most of them hadn't really left their towns very much, so they identified a lot with their ethnicity. In Xinjiang, it was very strong towards their ethnicity, but that's probably, I don't know if this is really proper, but they definitely were one of the most distinct like it's like worlds apart culture-wise than Han Chinese. So maybe some of the ones that are, you know, geographically closer to more Han centers, they were, I think they connected a little more to, you know, overall Chinese loyalties, I think. But
I would say province too, though. I mean, most of the, well, I guess the people that we were interacting with a lot in Beijing were students, and you know, they would come up to us and they'd be like, oh yeah, you know, I'm from this province or that province, and you know, because there's big differences between, you know, each area. So that's.
I think if you ask somebody and if they were Han Chinese, they would say I'm Chinese. But if you went to Tibet and said, oh, what are you? It wasn't like, oh, I'm Chinese. It was, I'm Tibetan, or I'm Uyghur. Yeah, that was the first thing they would say. Chinese was kind of like just the passport they carried, I would say. So.
I don't know if you've heard, but during the opening ceremonies for the Olympics, where they showcased the 56 ethnic groups with their traditional garb, my understanding was they were Han actors portraying.
I'm sorry.
Just such an overwhelming majority, 93% of 1.3 billion people are Han, that it's just so. Even despite the fact that it's huge tracts of land that are minority or lived in by minorities, it's just the whole country. You gotta think Han when you think, you know, Chinese, and that's the same way they think.
And I don't want us to like paint this as like being a really divisive thing, because wherever you went, they were all proud of the Olympics. There are certain things about the country that they're all proud to share in, but you know, they do identify with different groups in different aspects. So.
We have time for one more question. Okay. Well, see, speaking of Olympics, last March I had the privilege of accompanying our leadership, the superintendent, the dean, the commandant, to the Chinese Naval Academy. And we were told in March they would depart for Beijing. The entire brigade, Chinese Naval Academy, would be in Beijing participating in the Olympics. It turned out most of the drummers were very dramatic. Those were Chinese midshipmen.
Wow.
That's very dramatic. Well, speaking of which, see, last week we had a very nice panel on the midshipmen spent this semester in Japan, and their experiences were mostly confined to the Japanese military culture. And here, of course, China, you cannot do that. When we were there, actually, the Chinese Naval Academy does have a very robust program of exchange, foreign exchange. But their idea of exchange is you have students from Africa, from Asia, from Europe. Every single one of the foreign student exchanges were confined to separate building, and a separate dining hall, separate program. They're not mingled with their brigade at all. So, and I guess that's a really big problem with us. So, but I'm glad you're not mingling with the Chinese Naval Academy, because what you see here is really the observation. You go to China not only as a language student or cultural student, you're an investigator. You went there with questions, and you touch the subterranean level of Chinese society, and that's really is amazing to me. I mean, I think, you know, you're talking about the 30JAN, the social problem, the pollution, the aspiration for modernity, and the desire to get rich, ethnic minorities, or media control. Everything you see is a very complex issue. And I think that's what education is all about. I mean, I don't think anybody from West Point can get this level. Would you agree?
Definitely.
Yeah. Thank you very much, each one of you. And